Let's read through the very first issue of EGM, the May 1989 issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly. During that time, the NES was dominating the US market with Super Mario Bros. 2, which would eventually go on to sell 7.4 million copies worldwide. And, of course, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, which would sell over 4.3 million copies worldwide. The first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, a game that would eventually go on to sell over 4 million copies worldwide, was just released for the Famicom in Japan. The US release was set for June of 1989. The US release of the Sega Genesis was still a few months away. In the arcade scene, Double Dragon, its sequel Double Dragon 2, and Golden Axe were popular. Meanwhile, Capcom was busy with releasing its own beat-em-up game, Final Fight. In Japan, the successor to the Famicom, the Super Famicom, was shrouded in secrecy. Nintendo had demoed the Super Famicom to the press in November of 1988, but would wait until July of 1989 to hold their second demonstration. The hype for Mega Man 2 for the NES was huge during this time. The game was set for a June 1989 release in the US, so it makes sense that EGM would select the image from the box for its first issue. Taking a closer look at this Mega Man 2 image here, we see that it's a huge improvement over the box art image from the first Mega Man game. I mean, the image actually looks like Mega Man. He's fighting what looks like Quick Man and Crash Man. There's a scientist hiding behind Crash Man. I think it's supposed to be Dr. Wily, even though it kind of looks closer to Dr. Light. Even with all of that going for this image, there's still something off about it. I think it has to do with the weapon Mega Man is shooting. When Mega Man shoots, he's shooting stuff out of his arm cannon, the Mega Buster, or Rock Buster for you Japanese gamers. Here, he's holding a pistol trying to shoot Quick Man. It kind of makes Mega Man look like he's about to murder Quick Man. Kind of makes him look like a bad guy. Anyway, there's a green bubble here that says that this issue includes a Mag Max poster. That's not a typo, and it's not EGM predicting that Puma would eventually release a Mag Max shoe. There actually was an 80s horizontal shooting game called Mag Max. It was in the arcade and also on the NES. My old school buddy, Mr. Fu, likes that game. This issue opens with a 2-page Tengen ad of 4 classic games: Gauntlet, Pac-Man, RBI Baseball, and Tetris. I've posted enough videos of RBI Baseball. I don't have the Tengen version of Pac-Man, and Tetris will be discussed later in this issue. So let's take a quick look at Gauntlet. If you've never played Gauntlet, think of it as a simpler version of Blizzard's Diablo series of games. Each stage is basically a maze, and your goal is to get to the exit before you die. There are 4 different types of fighters you can choose from: the Warrior, the Valkyrie, the Wizard, and the Elf. Each has their own strengths and weaknesses. For example, the Warrior is all about attacking things physically with his axe, but he's also the worst magic user and moves the slowest. In contrast, the Wizard can do the most damage with magic potions, but he also has the worst armor. As a kid, my mind was blown when I first played the arcade version of Gauntlet at my neighborhood 7-Eleven. Something about that game appealed to me. I think it's because the game was co-op. You have to remember now, back then, there was no such thing as Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, or Battle.net. If you wanted to play co-op, you had to have another person physically there with you. I think working together to achieve some type of common goal was something that really appealed to me. And co-op gameplay was something that wasn't really featured in a lot of arcade games. I mean, sure, you had games like Double Dragon and Final Fight and Golden Axe where you could do co-op play and fight together, but not all games were like that. There are many games like Pac-Man where if you play two players, one person takes a turn, and when they die, the second person takes over. Then we're presented with a table of contents. The screenshots for the top 4 games I recognize: Bubble Bobble, Baseball Stars, Tecmo Bowl, and 1943. The 5th screenshot looks like some type of flying game, but I don't really recognize it as something on the NES or Sega Master System. So I guess we'll see later on in this issue what that game is. An ad for John Elway's Quarterback, an NES American football game. This issue has an article that compares Tecmo Bowl to John Elway's Quarterback, so we'll get to that later on in this issue. Then we have the editor's intro. It talks about the state of gaming at the time. Kind of a neat little time capsule of gaming in the late 1980s. This section right here describes a failed 16-bit system from a British company called Konex. The system they were developing was called Slipstream. Of note is the people working on Slipstream would eventually go on to work on the hardware that would become the Atari Jaguar. We looked at Airwolf in the last Let's Read. I want to hold off on Wizards and Warriors, and I really don't like WWF WrestleMania. So let's take a closer look at Rambo on the NES. I feel like Rambo sometimes gets a bad rap. If you're into old school NES games, then Rambo is very much like Predator for the NES, which makes sense because both Predator and Rambo were developed by the same company, Pac-In Video. Pac-In Video also worked on other movie to NES video game tie-ins such as Die Hard and Terminator 2. If you're not into those old school movie to video game tie-ins, then think back to what it was like to play the action platforming portion of Zelda 2. The one where you're jumping around in the forest trying to dodge those spiders, or jumping across ledges to try to dodge bubbles. Take that portion of the game, mix it with the awkward navigation system of Friday the 13th for the NES, and then you have Rambo for the NES. So is it a bad game? In my opinion, no. In fact, I kind of like it. It does remind me of Zelda 2, without the parts where you go into the town and get hints about where to go next. The gameplay for Rambo has so much in common with Zelda 2 that you have to wonder if the developers for Zelda 2 also worked on Rambo. It also reminds me of one of my most favorite games of all time, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, because you have to survive in the jungle doing battle against the snakes, spiders, and enemy troops, and whatever else is out there trying to kill you. I'm going to save winter games for another time. So let's take a look at Tiger Heli. Tiger Heli is a port of an arcade game. The game itself is basically a vertical scrolling shooter where you're flying a helicopter and your job is to destroy everything else that's shooting back at you. It's an okay shooting game for its time. The only issues I have for it are it's a little glitchy, and then the 2-player option for the NES isn't really co-op. You're basically taking turns when the other person dies.